Hello and welcome to everybody who has come by to do this watercolor today. We're going to do a landscape today, and we're going to mix up a little bit with that landscape because we're going to do it in a diamond shape as opposed to a true horizontal. So it might be a little bit trickier. So what you can see is I've taped up my 4 cm by 4 cm square, and then I've turned it so that we have a diamond shape. What might make it a little bit easier for you is to take your pencil and draw the middle line here and another one across what's going to be your horizon, just to give you an idea of where you're sitting so that your mountains are drawn the way that you want them to. And then what I've done is I've just taken my pencil and just started to lightly outline the mountains in here. And the reason I'm going to do this is because, and a little bit of this grassy land here. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to use a wet on wet technique in the sky. So I want to use wet water, and I kind of want to know where I should be going. So to start off with, once you've got those mountains drawn on, you're just going to wet up to the line of where your mountains are going to be. And the nice thing about watercolors is that the pigment color won't go any farther than where you've painted it wet. So this kind of prevents you from, and probably really hard for you to see. Maybe if I add a little bit of gray, you can just see where I'm painting just with water. So you don't need to use any color on yours. You would just use plain water just to wet that background. And again, if you see that your paper is kind of folding on you, you can turn it over and just paint a nice big X with just water across the back. And then as the paper is drying, it'll shrink and keep it nice and straight. So once we've got the water into our background, we're going to use one of the blues. You've got kind of a couple of blues to choose from in my palette. So whatever blue you have. Sometimes I'll mix the blues together too, if I'm not happy getting the blue that I want. And then you're just going to start dropping that in to your background. So you'll notice I'm not actually using any kind of brush stroke. I'm just dropping it in and really just letting this play. I guess you'll hear me say that a lot. I like to let the watercolor pigments and the colors just kind of play on their own in the background. Now you can start to give the idea, if you want to have some clouds in the sky, you can start to maybe just not paint some of the areas and get a nice couple of cloud formations going. But what we're going to do is, once this is still wet, I'm going to take some tissue paper or paper towel if you'd like, and you're just going to dab and bring out some areas where you want to put the clouds. And then when you go back in, you just start to tap underneath that so that that cloud formation starts to show up. So that's a fun way of kind of pulling some clouds out of the sky. You can also add just a little bit of a different color underneath your clouds, just to bring up some of the definition. You'll see I'm not actually using any white. I'm just playing with the pigment and letting it go darker where I'd like it. And again, usually around the edges. And then letting it play underneath these clouds. Okay, and so we can let that first layer kind of dry. And then we can add some more. So what we'll do is I'm going to use this blue that's still on my palette, and I'm going to add some Payne's Gray to it. And you get a nice, you could use black too, because you're adding so much water to it that you're getting just a really nice gray. And this is because we're going to start to just do that first layer of mountains. So I'm going to this is a wet on dry. I didn't dry it beforehand. I'm just painting a layer, and I'm not going to paint all of it because we're going to go over it again. I do know that this little valley part in here is going to be darker, so I do want to put that down there. And you'll see I've left some areas at the top here. That's for where I want the snow to be. And this one's going to be a little bit darker here in the corner. Okay, and then I'm going to add some color to this one. And I'm just really trying not to get, oh, part of my paintbrush is falling off. It's nice. That's that paint around my paintbrush. I've had this one for a really long time. Okay, and then just pull this over. So I'm not getting it where I'm going to have really dark. This is kind of your mid-tone. So this is where it's not going to be the highlight, but it's not actually going to be the shadow part either. So I'm just going to draw that in there. Now, if I touch those two together, they're going to run together, right? So we have to be careful of that. And then for the grass, I'm going to go back to doing a wet on wet technique. So I'm going right up to where I had the gray, or where that horizon line is. And we're just making that nice and wet down here. And then I would like you to get whichever green you have. I tend to really kind of mix my greens together. And then my color theory trick, of course, for forever the art teacher, is pulling some of this red out. You can just put it in the corner of your palette here. Because if we add a little bit of red, which is the complementary color of green, then that's going to darken up our green and give us more of a hunter green. And that's kind of what I'm looking for. So you see that color just kind of changed. And it's not so bright. And then I'm going to kind of turn this a bit because I want to I'm going to do this in kind of dropping lines. And I really just want it to decide where it wants to flow all by itself. I don't want to have anything. I don't really want to direct it too much. I just want to drop in a little bit more pigment. Okay, and what I'm going to do with that is I'm just going to let that dry because I really like this bleeding, kind of fading look that's in that foreground. So that'll be it for our wet on wet technique for this drawing. So I'm going to turn it back the right way. And I'm just going to take a little bit of time here just to clean up my palette a bit. And then what I'd like to do is I'm going to go back up and darken some of these colors. So go back into like the darker blues that I have. Again, I'm mixing all my blues together. And then what I'll do is, complementary color of blue is orange. So you can put some orange up there because it doesn't take a whole bunch, right? And this is just good color mixing practice for my students. I always ask them to do some of this, right? And it dulls down that color and darkens it. So it's not such a stark blue, it's more muted. And that's what I want because I'm going to go back in. Again, I'm just going to touch underneath my clouds into the corners because I always like to have the darker areas in there. Down here right by the mountains, I'll make that darker. And because I'm always very aware of the fact that I want the person's eye to travel through the painting, I'll try and have the darker areas that bring the eye in and then take the eye back out again. So you'll see darker images on the sides or cut pigments on the sides. So we're just darkening these up a bit underneath where we have our clouds. Just bringing that out a little bit more. You can pick up some of the color if you're not liking it or if you think it's going too dark. You can dry off your paintbrush. You could also decide just to spray water right on here too. So we've got some cloud formations here that we're liking, and some shading underneath them, some color coming out that's different, gives it more of an interesting look. I'll bring out some darker, just kind of drop in there. It's a little bit too dark, so I can pull that out. Pull in some of this here. I do like that color contrast with the other blues. It was just a little bit too dark when I dropped it there, so we'll carry it out throughout here. And I think this cloud and this cloud might be just a little bit too bright. So after this dries, this layer, I might come back in and just darken those up a little bit. We'll see. They're just not blending as much as I would like them to. Right, so you can just bring in some water and darken them up a little bit so that they're not as white. There. And we can add pen and ink to this too, which I will often do. So that's our sky. Now I want to go back in, and so I'm going to pull some water out and some Payne's gray. And the nice thing is that once we've got that second layer in the sky, we can use some of that blue and just pour it in here to our mountains. Then you kind of get this monochromatic look traveling through your paintings. So this is the second layer. So you'll see I'm getting a different color, but where they overlap, I'm getting another color. And I love that about watercolors. So I want to encourage that and not completely cover up everything that I had before, but create that extra layer again. And then I'm dropping in some darker Payne's gray here. So I guess I lied. We have a little bit more. A little bit more of the wet on wet technique. I think that's just because it's my favorite. I use it a lot. Okay, so we're going to pull up this color in here. I'm going to leave the white areas alone. That's for my snow on my mountaintops there. And you'll see I left some here too. We want to try and give some contrast into these mountains, right? So it doesn't need to all look the same. Put a couple of little rocks here at the side. That's a nice one, but I think I want it to go a little bit darker just down here and again, I'm just going to let that water play and go where it would like to go. Okay, so we're going to add that last layer over here too. And I'm going to save some of the previous color underneath and then just darken this up. Again, bringing those darker areas into the corners. Just for me personally, I just think it adds some contrast and brings the eyes over. And we're going to do some black silhouetted trees. So we're going to carry this color throughout. And I'm actually not going to touch the grass again. I just really loved this effect that it was having just. So I'm going to dry this right now. So we're going to go in with just really, really dark. You can go with the black, or you could go with like a really rich pigment of the Payne's gray. It's up to you. And you can change the size of your paintbrush if you'd like. You can go with a much smaller one. Depends how comfortable you are with doing the trees. This is where some of my students get a little bit nervous because we're going so dark. They don't like that because they're afraid of making a mistake. What you can do is I've always got scrap watercolor paper around me. So even before you started, you could just have a practice one. I can show you how we're going to do these trees before we go on to the actual piece. So we're going to get a nice pigment rich color here to silhouette in. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to draw just a line down, right? To simulate that chunk of my tree. And then this is not scientific. This is the idea of a tree. It doesn't look perfectly like a tree, but I know that a tree is smaller at the top and that it gradually goes out in a bit of a triangle. And I know that it's not ever a perfect triangle. Sometimes you have branches that have broken, or you've got some part of the tree that's been cut off. So I do this kind of squiggly motion all the way down that stem. And I just gradually get bigger and bigger on the sides, because I know that the tree is going to be bigger at the bottom than it is at the top. And I'm not overly worried about the details of the tree, making it look like a perfect tree. I don't think I could ever pull off a Robert Bateman painting where it looks like photographs. So this is me enjoying my own little idea of what this tree would look like out here in front of the mountains. So we're going to do that all the way to the bottom. And there's your tree. So we're going to do, that's pretty much the technique I'm going to use for putting some trees into our landscape. So I'm going to move this here so I have the trees pointing the right way. And just hide that up there. And then I need to make sure I've got lots of this dark pigmented Payne's gray. Again, you could use black or any color you want it to, really. But we're just going to do a silhouette. So I don't like to have anything that's directly in the middle. That's just me. So I'm going to start over here. And this will probably be one of the tallest trees if I don't go a little bit taller on this side. So we'll start here. And that is just our thin line down. I was thinking I should fix this mountain because it's coming to like a point, and my mom will giggle about that because we always have that argument about no mountain ever comes to a perfect point. But I will leave it to her. It's like a homage to you, Mom. There you go. And so we're just going down, right? And these don't look perfect. They shouldn't. And I don't think anybody should feel like it needs to look exactly like mine. If you want to paint your trees differently, you can. If you don't want to put trees in your landscape, you don't have to either. I was just thinking it's starting to get to that time of year where it would be great to go camping and get out into the mountains. So that's where the inspiration came from this. Okay, so just gradually getting bigger. You could, this would go a little bit faster too if you wanted. You could use a bigger paintbrush, or as I just did, some more pigment. Right. So we're kind of coming to the edge here, so I know that that tree is going to be behind it. But that's okay because I'm going to put some more trees in. So this tree might not even stay in full. So that is one tree. And I'm going to put another tree on the side here. I do want to have some symmetry, but at the same time I like to work in odd numbers. I just find it more aesthetically pleasing. So this one I'm not going to go as tall, or should I go taller? No, I think I'll just go a little bit lower. Bring that one down. Okay. When we're done too, if there's anything you want to add, you could also add to these silhouettes with just black marker too. In fact, what you could do is if you're not feeling comfortable with this, you could take your black pen, gel pen, or your black marker and put these silhouettes in at the end. Although I don't think I would let any of my high school students do that. I'd probably make them do it this way. But you can, because this is supposed to be fun and relaxing and not stressful for anybody. Okay, so I'm going to put another tree down here. So this is where you'll see that this is going to kind of start to overlap a bit here, which is good. We want that to happen. Oh, my cat just jumped on and moved the table. Okay, so let's move this one. And this one can kind of, like, you can start to go over top of it too, right? So this tree can be in front of that one. I do want there to be some space in between so you can see through the tree, because you would on some of the trees when you go out into the mountains. But then I think I'll end this up in here where it's really dense and kind of blacken that in down here at the bottom. And I'm going to do the same here. I'm just going to give the idea that there's a tree here, but really it's going to just kind of blacken in that area there too. And that's an even number. So I need to bring in one more tree over here. And I think it's going to be completely out of the picture, where we don't see the top of it. We just kind of get a glimpse of this middle piece here. This one's leaning over a bit too. I can kind of try and fix that a little bit, but I'm not too worried. You can have a tree. It's crooked. I'm not liking this paintbrush though. It's not, I should have used a thicker one. This one isn't holding as much paint as I like. So you'll see I'm like getting water and paint a lot on this with this paintbrush. Okay, so there we go. This one's starting to dry. So I think I'm going to dry this layer and then I'm going to just darken up the trees a little bit. I'm just going to go back in and just darken this up just a little bit here and there. Again, I'm not going to completely cover the last layer that I did because I want that to shine through. I like giving my painting some texture, some different colors, lots for people to look at and find. Just darkening up a few areas. Okay, so the last step on this is I'm going to splatter some white. Again, it's all about giving it some depth and some detail and some fun. So you do want to make sure that your painting is completely dry. Otherwise, it just gives you little puddles of mud. Okay, so make sure your paintbrush is nice and clean. I'm going to go back to the bigger one and make sure my water is nice and clean. I can also easily clean this up a little bit, just like that. So just bring some water and just get your white nice and juicy. Lots of pigment so that it shows up very well. So you can just add some more water. And then we're just going to splatter some of this on there. So my students love this part too. So I need some more, I think. Not very much on there. Maybe we'll try this pencil. This pen. There, that's better. Okay, and before I do my last step, I'm going to dry that one more time. My last step is adding some ink. I like to use the OptiFlow just from Staples. It's not really hard to find. I just find it flows really nice, and I'm going to do a little bit of scribbling to outline where my mountain pieces are. Right, and you can add some squiggles too where you want that to be a little bit darker. And so you don't need to perfectly outline it, right? We just want to make that image really, I just find this really makes the image pop from the paper. You don't even need to do this part really. If you don't want to, you could just leave your painting the way it is. I'm just kind of scribbling that horizon a bit. And then this is kind of really heavy at the bottom here. So I'm just going to kind of do some scribbling along the edges here too. and just kind of carry that black up. And then I figured I would just sign it up here. And that brings that. Maybe I'll just do a few more details in here. This one just looks a little. There we go, just like that. Okay, and if you want, you could go back in with a white gel pen if you want to bring some of the dots out again. But I'm happy with that the way it is. So we'll just carefully and slowly remove tape so that we don't rip our paper. Really missing my nails. Stupid COVID. There we go. Just like that. And last piece. You'll see it's still a little wrinkled, the paper. I'm just going to have to wait a little bit for that back. I could dry the back with the hair dryer. And then if I find my eraser, I can erase this line that I had under here, because I think I'd like to do a bit more of a border on this one. So just erase this line. And then I'm going to trim it up a little bit more than it is. I'll line that piece up there. There, that's a nice big, a little bit bigger of a border than I'm usually giving it. Just line that up like that. And there you go. You have a mountain landscape. I think this needs a little bit of black in here. I think in the original one I had the trees going all the way around, so it was kind of unified, but this one I didn't. So I'm just making sure we have that continuity of that black there. Again, thank you so much for joining me for this watercolor tutorial, and I hope that you come back soon.